So it is 6:30, and aloha everyone. I think people are slowly entered into our town hall today, and I'd like to welcome you all. My name's PJ4. I am a local Kailua resident here. I've been here for a number of years. I do work in the education field for the State Public Charter School Commission, and I've been blessed to know all of these legislators who are here today to see if we can engage some question and answer. And I love the fact that our Windward legislators always make time for all of us over here and see if they can address our concerns or give us some feedback on what's going on in the legislature. So with that, I'd like to welcome you all. I want to make a couple little ground rules and kind of updates fast. One, the chat is where we're going to send all of our questions tonight. So we're not going to be able to obviously write them down on 3x5 cards and hand them to us. So if you have a question, please drop it in the chat. And for that protocol, please identify which legislator you would like to address your question to. Could be more than one. Please do that. And then after you identify which legislator, then please make sure you write your question down. Again, ask what you need and what you want. We do ask that these be respectful. All the legislators, myself and the moderators will be able to monitor the chat. I do not believe you will be able to monitor the chat from where you are, but you can answer or ask questions in the chat. So I just want to let you know that. I think that's pretty much it. And since we are expecting a number of people, I think we're going to get right up into introductions and open comments from everybody. And again, let's have a great, wonderful, informative evening. And how about that? So thank you again for coming. Why don't we get started? And what we're going to do is each of our legislators is going to open up with minutes to share some opening thoughts. And we're going to start with Senator Jarrett Keohokalole. Did I get that right, Jared? I think I did. So Jarrett, why don't you start us off? We'll give you 3 minutes going and some opening comments.
Oh, let me get that for you, Senator.
Hello, aloha, everyone. It's very nice to be with you. PJ, you did a great job on my name. Thank you for trying. I'm Jarrett Keohokalole. I'm the state senator for Senate District 24, which is basically covers from the Valley of the Temples to the Marine Corps base, and then most of the Mauka sections of Kailua. So Aikahi, the Aikahi hillside, Kala Hill hillside, and everything Mauka of the boat dealership. This is an exciting and interesting legislative session so far. Because of all of the tourist activity that we had over the summer and then in the winter after the Delta surge, we're in a situation where the economic picture is looking good. There's a surplus in state revenue. So the primary theme of this year's legislative session is how we utilize the surplus funds appropriately to finish the recovery from COVID, and then do some forward planning. So some big ticket items are education dealing with learning loss. The governor has proposed, pursuant to the Constitution, a $100 refund for every citizen in the state of Hawaii. That accounts for about $110 million. There is a really significant proposal for housing to address the Department of Hawaiian Homeland's wait list, but there are also negotiations about infrastructure and affordable housing for everyone all together to address the price crisis that we're in. And then the big one that I'm the lead on in the Senate as the health chair is the Red Hill crisis. I'm happy to take questions about the Red Hill situation. The Board of Water Supply has been very good about reaching out to the community to articulate how that water crisis impacts our community. It impacts us on the windward side, even though we are not directly on that water system. It's going to have long-term impacts to our water resource capabilities, especially in the summer months when we're at peak periods. There are 3 wells in the Red Hill area that are Board of Water Supply drawn wells that account for 20% of our island water consumption. And it's going to take a long time to replace that capacity. And it's not known yet at this point whether we're going to need to or not. There are multiple efforts underway by the Navy in coordination with the Department of Health and the EPA. One is to address the drinking water contamination at the base housing. 2 of 19 neighborhood zones in the base housing have been cleared to return back because their water systems have been fully flushed out, retested 3 different times, and have been given the go-ahead by the EPA and the Department of Health. The aquifer contamination is a much broader, more difficult long-term issue. The main priority is making sure we don't have widespread aquifer contamination because of what happened at the facility. And then the last issue is the permitting and whether the underground storage tank facility at Red Hill will continue to operate into the future. There's federal, state, and county processes at play there. My time is up. Happy to take questions, and thank you for joining us.
See, I just contributed. You got to put a quarter in every time when you're muted. So I just dropped a quarter in the kitty right now. Senator Chris Lee, please, 3 minutes, share with us.
Hey, thanks. Hey, everybody. Great to see so many familiar faces, or at least names, on the Zoom. My name's Chris Lee. I represent Kailua, Waimanalo, and Hawaii Kai in the state Senate. And just building on what Senator Keohokalole had talked about, there are obviously a huge set of issues that are before us, because this is the first year, obviously, out of COVID, tentatively out of COVID, where the legislature is sort of returning to all the other issues that I think haven't made the news because COVID's been dominating. But a lot of those are certainly right in our wheelhouse on the windward side, protecting our environment. We've been working with the Trust for Public Land and our colleagues and everybody to try and preserve the Monowili lands that are just on the verge of hopefully being put into preservation in perpetuity. The EV Coast, similarly, we have a lot of issues that have come up during COVID on that end of the windward side, and we've been working a lot over there to protect that really rare natural resource. And then more in our face down at Kailua Beach Park, there have been a lot of folks complaining about conflicts with, now that all the tourists are back, you have kayaks, you have kite surfers, swimmers, folks just trying to walk down the beach. So we've been working with DLNR to try and sort that out. We've got a couple updates and tentative fixes for that in the works. And then finally, chatting about some of the perennial issues that have come up. We've been doing a lot of work. I chair the Transportation Committee in the Senate, so doing a lot of work on helicopters. And we finally have got some headway there, because up until now, there's been a lot of pushback from the federal government, who controls the entire airspace. And it seems like we actually have opportunities to actually do some basic regulation and reporting and other things in that space to try and ensure that we don't have helicopters continuing to fall out of the sky or certainly threaten our communities. And last but not least, while I still have a minute left, the fastest cost of the quickest rising cost of living this past 12 months has actually been the cost of transportation. Federal government reports it's gone up about 23% in just 12 months for folks with cars. That's insurance, gas, maintenance, all the things. And obviously that's a huge deal for people here in Hawaii, and something that we hear about a lot. So we've got a number of bills in the works this year to really dive into how to reduce that cost and improve the capacity for people to get around without having to bear the roughly $13,000 per year it costs to pay for all that stuff. So there's a lot of updates there, but let me wrap it up there and just say it's great to be here and happy to answer questions as they come up. Mahalo, everybody.
Thank you, Senator. Next up, we have Representative Scot Matayoshi.
All right, aloha and good evening, everyone. My name is Representative Scot Matayoshi. I represent a fairly small portion of Kailua, just Maunawili and Olomana, a little bit by Castle Hospital as well. Most of my district is District 49, which is encompassing Kaneohe side. I don't want to rehash what the 2 senators have already talked about. Obviously, Red Hill is a huge deal. Senator Keohokalole, as his position in the health chair, it's much better to answer those questions. But I do want to state that, my position is that we should drain the tanks and fully remove them. So really non-equivocal about that. I've got a couple other bills going through this session, some of which are still alive. Senator Lee talked about helicopters. Unfortunately, that bill has died, but I did think of what I think is a way around federal laws, doing a noise nuisance violation and allowing private citizens to enforce it. Unfortunately, kind of mimicking the Texas abortion bills, trying to skip around federal law there, but hopefully that we can use that idea for good. Unfortunately, that bill is no longer alive right now, but I do want to come back to that because I really do feel like that might be one of the ways that we can enforce laws, not regulating where helicopters can fly necessarily, but allowing people to sue based on noise nuisance violations. So hopefully that'll be coming back in a future session and we can get some headway on that. There is one of my big pushes in the last couple of years has been to ban flavored vaping products, which really disproportionately target kids. We're pushing a new generation on nicotine, cigarettes aside, and what we really need to do is to ban the flavors that make it so easy and so tempting for kids and really that are marketed towards kids. My bill is still alive. It passed through CPC today, so that's the last committee in the House today. But the Health Committee tacked on a bunch of very poison pill amendments to it. But it will be heading over to, hopefully, we'll be heading over to Senator Keohakalole's committee, where we've already discussed, and he's going to be rehabilitating the bill to make it a much more basic, straightforward flavor ban on vaping products. I think that has a pretty widespread appeal in our community. I think a lot of people want it, and I think the long-term healthcare costs that we will save, not to mention just the healthcare issues for the future, for our future generations, that will be immense, I think. So really hoping that bill has a chance this year. But again, that's an issue that I've been really fighting for the last couple of years, and happy to see that it's still alive and still making some progress through the state capitol. Last bill I want to talk about, I have been working at, a lot of you probably know, I used to be a public school teacher. And when I was teaching, I think we were making something, I was making like $37,000 a year starting. I mean, not much. The only way I could afford housing was I just had a lot of roommates, a lot of other teachers, 3-4 roommates at a time, kept housing costs low, but obviously not ideal. I'm pushing through a bill this year, and I'm working with Gentry down in Eva Beach, and if that location doesn't work out, then some other locations as well. But the theory is to put in a bunch of teacher housing to not only create more stock of housing generally for people, but also to create an incentive for teachers to stay and teach here. So the teacher housing would be available at well below market for teachers in their first 7-8 years of teaching, so that they can save up to buy a house. And it would also create kind of a teaching community. One of the things I really found valuable when I was first starting off teaching was that living with other teachers, it creates a support community. And I'm hoping that this community, this teacher housing project, will create that kind of community to allow teachers to stay on teaching and really dig down roots here, so we can stop losing new teachers and start gaining them again. Thank you. I'm open for any questions after
the
this.
education field. Thank you, Rep. We appreciate that. All right, Representative Marten.
Good evening. So nice to be here. So nice to see so many people show up. And I really just want to focus on the questions that you folks have tonight. It's your chance to direct where the conversation goes. But I do want to mention an elephant in the room, the recent corruption scandal that we've had in the legislature. And I just wanted to say that a lot of people will make very broad sweeping statements on social media or wherever that everybody is corrupt. Everybody is not corrupt. I'm not corrupt. And a lot of us would like to see tighter measures be put in place, tightening up. I don't know how much actual bribery there is, like what was uncovered, but there certainly are political campaign donations that could, influence people's views. And I would love to see that tightened up. And the House did pass a resolution recently to have a commission that will look at code of ethics, lobbying laws, campaign finance laws, and any other relevant laws or rules to make recommendations by the end of March, so that hopefully something can be done this session to tighten things up. So that's kind of an exciting change that might happen. I want to mention that our very own Robert Harris is involved in that. as our the most recent appointed chair of the State Ethics Commission. And another thing that will happen is the Capitol will be open, and it has never been open since I've been in office. So I really look forward. I don't look forward to having lobbyists come and take up my time, but I really look forward to having neighbors come and talk story. So you folks are all welcome. It is like going to a restaurant. You need to have a test or a vaccine, which I've been hearing a lot of unhappiness about, but those are the rules. I do have a lot of bills. Fortunately, none of my bills have died yet, though that, of course, I expect will happen. Some of my bills are inspired by the community. I have one trying to, with Senator Keohokalole, trying to address some of the noise problems with Wendy's. I have a bill that is a reaction to the terrible murder of Ariel Sellers. I have bills that are about the environmental issues that people know I was interested in when I came into office. I have 3 that relate to trees, composting, some about climate change, about women's health and safety, and also one about theft. I had my bike stolen, right? And it was sold right under my nose online. So trying to tighten up the laws around that. In addition, I am supporting bills on every issue. Have been having our finance hearings right now, and the breadth of the bills is very wide, and it's very exciting because there is money to be spent this year, unlike last year. So there's a lot of hope for putting in new exciting programs and ways to help people. So I look forward to your questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Marten. And Representative Branco, why don't you bring us home here on this one?
Aloha, everyone. It's a real pleasure to be here. I won't take too much of your time. I represent House District 50, which extends from Kaneohe Bay Drive, Aikahi, Coconut Grove, downtown Kailua, all the way up to Enchanted Lakes. And it's just a real honor to represent you folks and be able to represent the people, our family that I grew up with. And so I just want to say thank you for this opportunity. Before I talk about this legislative session, I just want to give you an update that I had put in last year for $1 million for solar panels to be built to help at Kalaheo High School. And so the governor recently released that money, and so we're hoping to get that project underway shortly. I just wanted to focus on one bill that I introduced that I think is really important. I see lots of names up here that I worked on, I've spoken to about this bill. But this bill is going to prohibit unfair and deceptive practices. Many of us have issues with kind of these black market, kind of illegal tourism issues in our district, whether it's an illegally operating kayak company that's operating in Kailua Bay or short-term vacation rentals. So the bill basically is that if you are operating an unpermitted or unlicensed business and we catch you advertising, it is now illegal, and that you will be fined by DCCA up to $10,000. So that bill is moving forward. I have several other bills relating to education, Olelo Hawai'i, as well as protecting our environment. But if you have any questions to that, I'm happy to answer that. But I don't want to delay any further. Let's get into the real meat of the conversation. Mahalo.
Representative Branco. For those of you, I'm just going to give a quick little disclaimer. My internet keeps telling me I'm unstable, so I might have to log off briefly and log back on with another internet. I've got a backup hotspot here. Hope it works though, so let's cross our fingers. All right, so the first question, I think I'm going to put this, it was directed to Senator Keohokalole. No, Senator Jarrett. That's better for me. I'm sorry. But I think all of you can jump in on it. When will masks go away?
Can you repeat the question one more time?
When will masks go away?
You know, a really good question. And the answer is that the position of the Department of Health at this point is that that should be the absolute last measure that is withdrawn before the emergency orders end. You know, throughout the pandemic, the position that the Department of Health has taken on what should be or shouldn't be done to address COVID has often not been the ultimate decision made by the counties or by the governor. On March 9th, because of the schedule, it's been very difficult to get the Department of Health on a public informational briefing. On March 9th, the House and Senate health committees will be doing a joint briefing with the different with all 4 counties, the Hospital Association, and the Department of Health to go through an update of what's going on, recap what's been happening in our healthcare system since the surge has started to subside, and have the opportunity to ask some really direct questions on the record of the administration. This administration has been notorious about, not being available to ask really forthright and comprehensive questions about what the direction is and why. I know there's been a lot of frustration in the community about the governor's execution of his emergency orders. Personally, for me, the governor has emergency powers that are broad, and it's for a reason. The processes around the guardrails around the extent of that authority is being discussed in the legislative session right now. I think it's a worthwhile conversation to have. I'm a little wary of limiting his powers just to address what's going on right now. I know people are tired of COVID, but one of the things we're trying to do right now is to get some clear answers on the position of the administration, on a timeline, and why. So it's unclear at this point how long masks will stay in place. Those are state-issued orders. The vax mandate in restaurants ends on March 6th. That was a county order initiated by the mayor, so that's going away. For as of right now, it is unclear at this point when the mask mandate will be lifted.
Thank you for answering that. We appreciate it. And I'm sure all of us will look back to some normalcy, but we also want to be safe. So thank you all for that work. So the next question is from Juliana Lopez. How are we going to deal with, it's something Representative Marten addressed a little bit, but we may be able to take this, and it's addressed to all of you. How are we going to be able to deal with the prevalence of bribes and pay to play or get things done? Seems like with the escalating price for rail, for all maintenance projects, those who have money can pay to get permits. For our government, I'm surprised that this is happening, is a bit incredulous. What is in place to make sure there is accountability and transparency? And I think Representative Marten, you alluded to this in your opening remarks, but I think I'm sure our would love to hear from other of our legislators on this. Why don't we go with Representative Marten? Go ahead, since you started it, and then everyone just kind of raise your hand and jump in or unmute yourself.
Okay, well, I am brand new, so I'm just going to say that I have never personally been, nobody has tried to bribe me. I'm not sure how it works, but I am, I'm familiar with, having run, I see that you actually need a fair amount of money to, and especially if you have a tight race, you need a fair amount of funds to run a campaign. And now I'm, more established financially. So for me, that wasn't a terrible situation to be in. But for people, if they're young or they don't have much money, they actually really are under pressure to somehow fundraise. And I think that makes them very vulnerable. I would be very open to having a dramatic reform of our campaign finance laws and having publicly funded campaigning or something like that. Serious restrictions on the amount any donor can give. But I do think, I'm not familiar enough with the system to know where the flaws are. Maybe somebody who's been around longer could address that.
Thank you.
I'll jump in. I was elected in 2008, and the very first year we had a big debate about this issue, right? How do you regulate the kind of ethical or unethical things that go on? And at the time, the legislature was considering a bill that would enable state contractors to make political contributions. Right now, the law bars that. If you have a contract with the state, you should not be donating to elected officials or other department folks who control the contract that you have. And the very first thing that I was able to help with was an amendment that stripped that language out of the bill to ensure that that doesn't happen. Today, fast forward, however many years, obviously the issue doesn't just go away. I don't think there's a real silver bullet for it. It's going to take eternal vigilance. I mean, that's the price of democracy and transparency and all of that. The Senate, just a couple days ago, voted out a bill that would, for the first time, bar fundraisers during the legislative session. And the criticism that has come up over the years is that you have these critical votes that happen on a very timely basis within the span of a couple of days or weeks. And if you're lining up a fundraiser right around that, there could be the appearance that you're asking folks to contribute right before you vote on whatever the bill is or the issue that they might want to see. So this would be the first time this is passed out of, I think, any chamber in the legislature, and it's going over to the House now for a vote. But it's not something that's new. This is done in many other states around the country and is common practice. So this would take that additional step, assuming it goes forward this year. It's not going to end everything that potentially could be out there, but it's certainly a start and something that I'm excited about because we haven't seen anything like this pass in Hawaii, at least since I've been around.
Rep Branco or anyone else want to share before?
I'll go after Rep Branco.
Yeah.
Okay.
What happened was just shocking and disgusting, right? Many of us joined government to make our communities better, to make government more responsive, and these types of actions are unforgivable. And so we just have to make sure especially, for me, I'm a freshman, as Rep Marten had said, we're still learning the system and we're still understanding. But this type of action is just appalling. And it was also appalling because this particular individual's money was across so many books of so many electeds. And so right now I'm looking at ways how we can stop that, how we can figure that out. In the House, we dropped a resolution immediately and we vote on it the very next day that created a system, a commission of those who fight for transparency for government, who also fight for good government. And so, and also to highlight too, the chair of this commission is Judge Foley, who is actually a constituent of mine who lives in Kailua as well. And so it's very important for us to lean on those advocates and to understand what is best for us. And hopefully we can move past this, because it's just very hard, especially for us young people in the legislature who are doing good work, who really do believe in the work we're doing. And this just casts a different shadow and keeps us away from doing the good work of the people.
So I agree with everything everyone's been saying so far. I do want to draw a distinction between what happened with Cullen and English, which was straight bribery. I mean, literally an envelope full of cash. I do want to draw a distinction between that and a campaign contribution, because I know people, a lot of people donate to campaigns. And if you feel very strongly for a candidate and you really believe that they reflect your interests or whatnot, I've gotten, I'm sure we've all gotten donations from family members or from community members before. And I don't want that to ever be construed as a bribe if it's not intended that way. Campaign contributions can only be spent on campaigns. Obviously, the situation with Kalani English and Ty Cullen was money that they were spending on mortgages, bills, other non-campaign related expenses. That is clearly wrong. I do agree that it would be nice to have a little more restrictions on the campaign side of things too, but it's a little more nuanced than that, I think. I've personally turned down money before. When I first got into office, I got $1,000 check from a tobacco company that I called them and politely declined, because one of my big issues is ending flavored vaping, and I just didn't feel it was right to take their money and obviously be going against their position. But that aside, I think it's really up to individual candidates too to decide if they receive a donation, do they want to keep it? Do they want to return it? It really is beholden upon us to police ourselves and be responsible with the kind of money and the donations we're taking. And to that end too, I know candidates who have accepted money from the tobacco companies and very much support flavored vaping bans. Just because they've accepted money from people doesn't mean they can't vote a certain way or precluded from voting a certain way and do in fact vote a certain way. So it's not always, you can't look at someone's donation list and say, okay, this is exactly who this person is, kind of thing, based on their donations. It doesn't always work that way. But certainly if they're accepting $5,000 in cash and shoving it under a car mat, that's a pretty clear indication of straight bribery that should absolutely not be allowed. And I'm kind of hoping that other corruption in the Capitol is rooted out from this. This may be just the start. So we'll see if this manages to root out any other bribes that might have been going on, and I very much support that if that happens.
All right. Why don't we move on to another question then? And here's one, and it's, I believe, for all of you. Any thought on using the KA State Park model in Kauai for Kailua Beach Park? Revenue for the state plus control of traffic and number of visitors, etc. I don't know who would want to jump in on that.
I'm happy to jump in.
Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
Please, Senator.
So
Branco and then Senator Lee. Yep. First.
So we heard that bill in Waterland, and that's a great model. It's a great pilot program, and I think there's a lot to be applicable for Kailua Beach. And so now on the Waterland Committee, we're actually looking at this and seeing how we can expand this to other state parks. The one issue, though, that we see with the reservation system that Kauai is using and for other parks is that they're all on different systems and they don't talk to each other. And DLNR needs to figure out a way where they all talk to each other and it's consistent across the state. And so that's one thing that Chair Tarnas, who's the chair of Water and Land, myself and him are looking at these types of models.
Yeah, PJ, I'll go.
Thanks.
Representative Branco's got it. He's absolutely right, and the bill that they have moving in the House is I think the right way to go. Basically, what happened is organically, because Ke'e Beach on Kauai and Wainapanapa on Maui on the Hana coast were absolutely overrun. If you've been to the North Shore of Kauai in the last 4 or 5 years, the parking situation goes so far back that it's actually a hike even to get to the beach, and it just causes a massive traffic jam at the end of the road. What's going on in Kailua is not much better, but that whole situation stimulated those organic initiatives that we really didn't need legislation to authorize. Part of the reason why this is a good idea is it's market dynamics at play. There is too much demand for use of these attractions in the tourist market. And so we need to implement price controls in order to manage things, because it's just, there's no other way to handle it. But the other side of it is that it is generating a significant amount of revenue. Just from Wainapanapa and Ke'e Beach on Kauai, they're projecting over $10 million worth of fee revenue from tourists to utilize those spaces. That can be used to further address the other needs of the Department of Land and Natural Resources in order to address tourism impacts. Because of the demand and because it makes so much sense to do, and the tourists so far have agreed and are tolerating the situation, I think it's a matter of time before we get the systems set up right to accommodate. People are going to expect an app that's really easy to use and simple, and I think we'll get there. But those are really good test cases and pilot projects that have been very successful so far.
Thank you, Martin, for using the hand raising. That helps me a lot. And then I can call on you all. Get back to my old classroom days. Representative Marten.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that this is something that when I first got elected, I went straight to DLNR to talk about. In my district, there are some like the Pillbox Trail is a classic example of an incredibly overused natural wonder, and there's no parking. It's terribly eroded. Somebody had a question about that. But I went to them and I said, can we restrict these? Can we make it a reservation system, something like Hanauma Bay, perhaps free to locals, charged otherwise, but limit the number and use the fees to have a guard there. One of the big problems of the Pillbox Trail is people like to go up to watch the sunrise. And so the people that live in the surrounding area get woken up every morning by slamming car doors, excited people talking about their hike they're about to do. And they chose to get up in the wee hours, but the people that live there did not make that choice. And so that's not fair. So basically that model, I talked to them, I went and talked to HTA, and everybody was very amenable. And it's just interesting that this idea has coalesced, and there seems to be a lot of traction, in part fueled by the exhaustion that people feel about tourism in our state, and how nice it was during COVID when we didn't have that pressure on us. So I think it's something that is happening. And I know that in Kailua, one place that we intend to use it is at the Pillbox Trail. And another place that seems perfect for that would be in Manuwili when they finish that complex. So I think that is something that will be a model. It's what they do in other places. They charge for state parks, and state parks are really well maintained. So anyways, that's all. I just wanted to add to it. Thank you.
That's so. Well, so since it was brought up a little bit, I'm going to move on to another question, and it's about the economy. Since you did bring up the tourism part and how nice it was, but we do know Hawaii has a lot of reliance on economy. So here's a question from the audience. I believe you all it's a bit of a statement than a question. I believe you all campaigned on diversifying our economy. And while that sort of diversification does not happen overnight, we are seeing a noticeable amount of small local businesses closing, in large part due to capacity and vaccine mandates. Yet you have all been largely silent on this. Do you have any justification for why these small businesses should close, and a reason why none of you have made any significant moves to actually prevent these businesses from closing or action to help them in these difficult times? It's a pretty lengthy question. I'm happy to repeat more if you'd like, but if you want to raise your hand, Scott, Representative Matayoshi, I need to be more polite. I'm sorry, I'm not as.
Yeah, for those long questions, is it possible to put it in the chat for us to see?
Jacob, can you handle that for me? I think Jacob can do that.
I'll also, I thought it was a question about diversifying the economy, which I was happy to talk about. I can talk about this one too, but it does sound like more of a health question. So I'll defer to Senator Keohokalole as the health chair if he'd like to respond, but if not, I can. But I think Jarrett is probably the more appropriate person here.
I'll chime in after that as well. Sorry, I can't figure out how to raise my hand here. The thing's not working.
You got it. It's up.
So, you know, I don't think there's a way to answer this that is going to satisfy the person who asked it. So I'm going to give you a straight answer, and then we can keep talking about it, because I'm okay with having a dialogue. You know, the vaccine mandates happened during the Delta surge in the fall. And if you go back and look at the reporting, the Labor Day weekend of last year and the weekend before, we reached max capacity in our hospital system in the state of Hawaii. It was a function of the number of licensed ICU beds that we were able to keep open and accommodate statewide. And the reason the ICU capacity became the linchpin was because if you had any sort of traumatic accident over those 2 weekends, there was no capacity to triage those folks. We had a situation in Hilo where labor and delivery was being done in the hallways because the labor and delivery wing was full of surgical recovery patients, because the surgical recovery unit was full of COVID patients. During that same time, in states like Idaho and Wyoming and Alaska, the hospital systems were also overrun. They initiated crisis standards of care, and people drove to Washington State and overrun the hospital systems in Eastern Washington and Seattle. We don't have that type of opportunity for folks who are not able to get a bed for a broken leg or appendicitis or whatever other medical emergency they're undergoing. They're not able to drive just to the next hospital however many hours away. In Florida, when they ran out of oxygen the same way we did, they trucked it in from Atlanta overnight, and that's how they managed the capacity. They trucked in the antibodies. So that's why the mandates were put in place, and it was a bit of a trade-off. to help the small businesses last year, a significant amount of the federal stimulus monies went in to address the unemployment insurance shortfall, which was in the billions of dollars. That's not immediate support for businesses. So this is not a sufficient answer I can recognize. We're going in again this year because there's that deficit of the unemployment insurance trust fund, which the businesses did not cause themselves and went along with, because as a community, we made these decisions to address the pandemic. A significant amount of the budget surplus right now is being proposed to address that that deficit so that the premiums don't go up. So, there was a significant amount of federal support that came in. There was a huge amount of state administrative resources put into making sure that those were facilitated. At the end of the day, if you did not agree with the approach that the state of Hawaii took to address the pandemic, I understand. But we did try to make sure that the businesses were kept whole. And I don't think that we're going back to shutdowns. We rode it out of this Omicron surge and we made it out the other way. I do expect other surges, the healthcare community does as well, but I don't think we're going back in that direction. And my hope is that we are at the end of the tunnel and we're not going back.
Yeah, I'll just build on what Senator Keohokalole was talking about. That unemployment insurance fix, I mean, that targets small businesses more than anybody else because they're the ones who can't afford all this extra costs, especially during a pandemic. And that was $700 million that went to subsidize that. But on the small scale, local to our community, it's clear that so many businesses had felt it. I mean, just the amount of turnover and shift from street to street as you drive around is huge. And at the beginning of the pandemic, we actually reached out to a number of our small businesses, town hall style, kind of just like this. We had, I think, 140 something businesses that we reached out to get everybody in a room with our federal and state agencies so that they knew exactly how to apply for all the grants and the opportunities and stave off shutdown and all that sort of thing. And then we went out actually and talked with some of those folks in the industry who were concerned and basically coming to us day in and day out asking, like, what, the governor's doing this, the mayor's doing this, they're not taking into consideration what our business is up to, and they're frustrated. And we actually got two of those folks opportunities to sit in on those task forces that were working to create some of those rules with the governor and the emergency folks who were creating that stuff in the early days of the pandemic. And then more recently, of course, it's been sort of triaging, helping deliver PPEs and other supplies to these businesses that need help, as well as, I think a bunch of us sat in at the Unemployment Convention Center triage place, answering calls from the employees of these businesses that were being laid off, working with the owners in many cases separately through our offices to try and help direct them and get support where support's needed most for their families. But more recently, to this day, it's still dropping off and trying to help out with supplies and the other things that, when you're running a small business, and I have a number of friends who've got them in Kailua, pretty much all the major places we know, from, Cinnamons and Crepes and all the other places that have come and gone and are still there. They're focused on that day to day. They can't be running around trying to go to the Department of Health or go to wherever else to get supplies for their folks and everything. So we've been sort of filling in that place. In fact, just a couple of weeks ago, we dropped off test kits for the employees at a bunch of these small businesses in Kailua to make sure that they're ready to go, that even though Omicron's not done yet, they have the supplies and the wherewithal to be able to make sure that their employees are safe so they can keep their businesses open. So there's a lot of that still goes on behind the scenes. It's not stuff that gets broadcast or advertised or anything like that. It's literally just triaging and stepping in to help where we can help.
Thank you, Senator. Representative Matayoshi?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, the pandemic did hit small businesses very hard, especially the restaurants. So I'm very sympathetic on that. At the beginning of the pandemic, I actually used some of my own money to stand up a website. We were just calling the Windward Menu, and me and my staff and other elected officials and their staffs, we just personally called every single restaurant in Kailua and Kaneohe and put up their current hours, whether they accepted takeout, their numbers, and directed their phone numbers, and directed people to those restaurants to try to keep them afloat. So we really tried everything we could in the beginning of the pandemic to try to drive business and especially takeout business to restaurants that were struggling. But I have to say for myself, I really appreciate and continue to appreciate the mask mandates and some of the restaurant restrictions that are in place, just because restaurants are a place where a lot of them are indoors. People are not wearing masks because they're eating and talking and laughing and drinking and whatnot. And that is a place where the CDC and others in our Department of Health have identified as places where the virus can more easily spread. And, in the beginning of the pandemic, my wife was 7-8 months pregnant. We have a child now that cannot be vaccinated. We're projected to have another one in about a week. So, I mean, we're a family that's very vulnerable to the coronavirus and have been on high alert for it. And I just want to say personally, I really appreciate seeing people who are wearing their masks indoors, who are properly trying to social distance where they can, because it really does protect families like mine who have young children who cannot get the vaccination or who are in a very tough spot even if we were to contract the coronavirus while my wife's pregnant. That's very dangerous to our children and our unborn child. And lastly, just on another personal note, Senator Keohokalole was talking about the hospitals being full, and I felt that very personally at home when my father had to delay for a fairly long time a medical procedure that was, I would not consider it an optional treatment, but we had to delay it for quite some time, and we had to risk this medical condition spreading because there was no room for what they considered an elective procedure, even though it was to me fairly life-threatening. And we just had to watch and wait and hope that the numbers went down enough so that my father could get this procedure. And thank God he finally managed to get it. But I did not appreciate that. And I think a lot of other people who are in similar situations and worse off, with people who are subject to strokes or heart attacks or whatnot, when our ICUs were full, that's a very scary time. Car accidents, things that people cannot prevent. And keeping those hospital numbers down was so essential. And also keeping the numbers down so that we could open the restaurants earlier, I think, was essential. So these restrictions were tough. They're very difficult. I know we lost a lot of good businesses that I would have loved to keep, but I think doing it allowed us to hopefully reopen faster than we would have normally, especially under the Delta surge and now the Omicron. So hopefully we could save more businesses in the long run. That's my hope. Thank you.
All right, thank you. We're going to move on to another question. I'm going to actually try to combine 3 separate questions. They have to do with cost of living and the gap in cost of living and housing, and also minimum wage. So one question was asked is like, what's stalling out the increase for minimum wage? They state from the audience from $10.10 up to $18. But with that, if you could include, what are you doing to help address the affordable housing issue in Kailua area? And also, there's a lot of people struggling to try and stay here because the gap between cost of living and wages. So there's 3 questions that are combined there. Not quite sure how you want to go jumping on those. Someone wants to address the minimum wage question straight up, go ahead. But are there anything going on in legislature about cost of living, housing, etc.?
I mean, first, every time somebody else has to go.
You win. There you go.
I'll go.
Thank you.
So there are so many bills that are trying to address housing. There's rent subsidies, not just for people that are under the poverty line, but there's also one that is for people that are more working class. There's a lot of focus on building more affordable housing. There's some projects for teacher housing, affordable teacher housing, which is something that Representative Matayoshi brought up, and something that I have been thinking about as well for our area. But in addition to all the housing bills, which we heard in Finance Committee, ones that are making it through the House, we just passed through probably 12 of them today. In addition to that, on the minimum wage, there are multiple minimum wage bills. One of them is the House Majority Package Bill. The Senate has already passed and sent over a minimum wage bill. I would be very, very shocked and very, very disappointed if we did not have a minimum wage bill that is meaningful. I know talking to small business people, friends of mine who are employers, they all pay their staff more than that already. They say they can't get somebody that will show up to work and be able to do the job for the minimum wage that we pay now. And they're okay with having a living wage. So that's something that I believe there's a lot of support for. And because this year we have more money to spend, I think housing has become a top priority, and I hope to see all those bills make it through.
Members of our legislators would like to weigh in on this.
I can jump in and just wanted to echo what Representative Marten said. You know, I would also be very shocked if minimum wage didn't pass. We have two different bills that are going through. We have the Senate version that asks for minimum wage to increase to $18 by 2026, and then we also have a minimum wage bill from the House that would increase minimum wage until $18 until 2030. And I think when it goes to conference, something will pass, and probably will be something in between there. But I think what we have to look when we look at the minimum wage, right, is what usually happens is some folks will say, okay, 2026, $18, that's the only way to go, right? There needs to be some flexibility in that, and we need to look at both measures and see where we can find a middle ground. And so those who are supporting the minimum wage increase, I want you folks to keep that in mind as we go through this process to figure out where's the medium, where can we go? And please don't just make a hard line. We have to figure out a compromise, and we have to figure out how we can get there and make sure that it just doesn't fall apart and the bill dies again. You know, before I got to the legislature, there was minimum wage increases proposing, but there was these hard lines that were put on the numbers, and then the bills just died. And so then this is why we're in the situation we are now. And so I please hope that wherever you are, please look at it, give good feedback, and help us make a good decision.
I'll jump in.
Anything else?
Just building on, I think, what everybody's talking about. I mean, it's just good to put in context because not a lot of people, I think, work at minimum wage who are probably here tonight. Let's just be real about that. I think what that means, though, is to keep it in perspective. You didn't get a pay raise this year. You got a 7% pay cut because of inflation in real buying terms. That's what this is really about, right? How do you ensure that the folks who are stuck at the bottom still have some ability to make ends meet? And while minimum wage isn't a be-all, end-all, it's going to solve that problem. It's an important step. So I'd expect something, I think, to pass as well, along with everybody else. I did want to comment. You know, I started talking tonight about just cost of living generally, since we're on that subject. And what goes often overlooked is the cost of transportation, which is number 2 behind cost of housing, of course, when it comes to things that people have to pay for on a regular basis. And certainly in Hawaii, where all our imported gas and fossil fuels are certainly higher cost as a result of that dependency on imports, that's something that we all feel in our pocketbooks. But it goes beyond that. You know, we have an opportunity here to really reduce that cost, because when you think about all our local families, right? Most people have cars, at least most families, at least that I walk door to door and chat with on a regular basis. Mom's got a car to go to work. Dad's got a car to go to work, maybe drop off the kids. Maybe auntie also has one. I mean, it's a huge cost, because each time you have another car in the family, it's another $10,000 to $13,000 per year that family is being forced to pay. And if you can get around without that, because you have better public transit, or you have options, especially in Kailua, where you have like a flat area where you can safely walk or bike to work, which is something that's been enormously successful elsewhere, you're able to maybe reduce from like a 4-car family to 3, or a 3-car to 2, and save a ton of money. And especially when we look at our next generation, we're at a point where when I graduated from high school not too long ago, 99% of our age group had driver's licenses. Just about everybody had cars. Today, that same age group and coming out of high school and into college and out of college, that's almost cut in half. probably because most folks can't afford it the same way that we could back in the day. And also because costs and everything else are ballooning in ways that it's just not a priority because there are cheaper ways to get around. So there's a lot of focus on how do we fundamentally change our transportation infrastructure to make it easier and cheaper for people to get around. And that's something that I think goes too often overlooked.
Thank you, sir. Would any of the other legislators like to jump in on this? Okay. So one of the questions that's come up, and it's kind of along those lines actually, and it's a bit of a follow-up, that even though we are talking about legislation that says, you know, small businesses, how are they going to afford such an increase in the minimum wage? Won't that actually drive a further increase of large businesses here in Kailua that can afford to pay the wages? And we know Kailua has a certain vibe we like to keep, and so that's always been a discussion here on the windward side. So any thoughts on that?
I'll just repeat that when I've spoken to small business owners, they don't pay minimum wage. You know, the type of person that they can hire for minimum wage is somebody who's not reliable and not necessarily skilled. And so I think that we will, you know, maybe they will change their business model slightly to make things more efficient, use their labor more efficiently. But I hope that I hope they stay open. But if they're a business that relies on $10 an hour labor to survive, maybe that's not the kind of business we need in Hawaii. We need a business that will pay a living wage.
Thank you, Representative Marten. Okay. There was a question, more of an update, and asking our legislators, would appreciate hearing from you. Any comments about the plans for Aloha Stadium, especially when prioritizing workforce pay housing over, say, an entertainment hotel complex?
Yeah, I can jump in. I haven't been super public about my stance on this, but we really need a stadium. I mean, I understand the appeal. I certainly understand that in order to keep Div 1, which that's a whole other discussion, but in order to keep Div 1 football, we need a stadium of a certain size. UH is saying they really don't have the space for that, etc. Whether that's true or not is going to be debatable, but we certainly have a strong need for housing, and in particular workforce housing, and it's much easier to build it on state land. Now, I'm not saying that we should build it to the density that some people have been proposing, because that kind of density, the Singapore model, is I think anyone who wants the Singapore model should go to visit Singapore and see not the beautiful Singapore towers, but the actual dense towers from Singapore that the regular people and working people live in. Because I went there, this is years ago, but I have a friend who lives in that kind of public housing, and I went to go see him in Singapore, and that is I think a lot of people here would not want to live like that. Let me just say that. So trying to cram as many people into as small a square footage as possible, I do not think is probably the right way to go. But using the space for a lot of workforce housing is probably the right thing to do, especially with the rail going there too, whenever that's going to be built. So without touching all of those other issues, yeah, I mean, it would be nice to have housing there instead of a stadium. But right now the plan is to put a stadium, and I just hope that they consider the kind of use for that area that can also be used for housing at the same time.
Representative, anyone else?
I can jump in.
So,
Um,
okay.
So just, you know, when we think of our community, right, we are all very vocal, and we want our community to, we want to be involved in the way the development of our community happens. Just so you folks know, the area representatives for the Aloha Stadium, Moanalua, that area, they've actually went through an extensive process, and the plans that are being proposed are actually plans that have a lot of community input. And so we also have to recognize that what the community wants there may not what we want, but we also have to recognize those community voices. And so that's one thing we have to recognize as they go forward in this process and what they develop. I do agree. I think there needs to be housing in that area, especially along the rail line. But we also need to always take into factor what the community wants. And that particular area, I'm good friends with some of the representatives from that area. That area holds a lot of the infrastructure from the entire state. A major highway goes through there. You know, they have Pearl Harbor. They also have the stadium area. So we need to really recognize what their community is asking for. And that has gone through an extensive process through their neighborhood board process.
Thank you, Representative Branco. Appreciate that insight. So here's a question. We're going to move on then, and this is directly related to Kailua. Theft and crime has been incredibly bad in Kailua. Every day, there are new notifications of cars being stolen out of people's driveways, houses being broken into, and aggravated assaults occurring. What are your plans to address crime here in Kailua or on the windward side? Yes, Representative Marten.
I don't have a solution for all crime, but I'm really interested in getting the public involved in helping identify their stuff, especially with, when stuff gets stolen, it usually is stolen not because people want it, it's because they want to sell it and get the cash for drugs or for whatever else they want. And I'd like to make it harder to resell. It turns out that the head of the criminal investigation unit at HPD is an IT guy. He has a background in data management, and HPD is all digital, right? They're pretty high tech. And so I would like to see, I have a bill right now that is looking at bicycles in particular, right? Which are already regulated. You're not supposed to sell stolen bicycles. And so there will be a publicly accessible database that HPD is making where you can check before you buy a secondhand bike to see if it's reported stolen. And people who are going to sell a secondhand bike, whether they sell it at a resale store or online or out of their garage, if they don't check first and verify that it's not on the list, then they are accountable for having sold a stolen bike. And it's a civil fine. It's not a criminal thing. You don't have to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt that they knew what they were doing. They just didn't check. That's the law. And so they would be fined $500, what the bike was advertised for or what it was sold for, whichever is higher. And another part of the bill looks at pawn shops and is trying to, again, digitize all of that material so that HPD can use that to better coordinate with items that are listed as stolen to trace and see if anything is a stolen item and get it returned. And the goal there, it's a first step towards actually creating possibly a publicly searchable database. I know there's Facebook sites like Stolen Stuff Hawai'i. People want to be part of the action. And I'd like to see that. Some states have publicly searchable databases of stolen items so that they can be aware consumers and not buy stolen goods, not create that market. So that is one small thing that I hope will happen this year. And I'm really appreciative that HPD is not asking for money. They are willing to do the work and make the databases because they actually have a lot of IT capacity already.
Thank you, Representative Marten. Representative Matayoshi.
I'm gonna once again throw Senator Keohokalole a question, but with a preface first. So I don't think you can talk about crime without talking about homelessness and the prevalence and the increase that we've seen over the years. I think everyone's seen it. Obviously, no secret. For a long time, we've been dealing with homelessness by kind of just having them move from park to park, not really dealing with the problem. We've recently started to use the state hospital to, and I will say a lot of homeless is kind of dual diagnosis. There's drug issues, there's mental health issues. I really think that on the windward side, we are lucky to have the state hospital there as a resource. Right now, the state hospital, and I'm sure you've all heard about it in the news, the state hospital has that new building, brand new building, still not up and running yet. But the concept was to have that new building take a bunch of the involved, basically the people there who have violated, who have committed crimes, put them in the new building, which is going to open up building we call Goonsburg. I put in about $53 million request into the budget for CIP this year to try to get the process starting in renovating Goonsburg to try to give us any beds for civil commit. We haven't been able to civilly commit people for a long time. And I think the only people at the state hospital right now are people who have committed crimes. And I don't want to wait for that to happen. We have a lot of homeless on the streets right now that could really use a bed at the state hospital to stabilize and to get back on their feet. And to just take them out of really bad situations. And I'm really hoping that refurbishing Goonsburg is going to allow us to get those beds for those civil commit patients. We also have, we actually set up an area on what we call JPAD for crisis stabilization beds that are in effect right now. And Senator Keohokalole knows a lot more about this, so I'm hoping he can expand. But a really crucial missing piece in the puzzle that those beds are currently filling. They used to be COVID isolation beds, but they've recently been expanding it too. And because we don't have as much of a COVID need, they've been using it for crisis stabilization. But I think that if we can tackle the homeless problem, you're going to see a noticeable drop in crime. And it's, honestly, it's just the right thing to do too. So with that, Senator Keohokalole.
Yeah, so for those of you that may or may not know about this concept of crisis stabilization, it's a national evidence-based best practice approach to homelessness. It's a piece of what some of you might know as housing first. And the basic concept is for our most chronic homeless individuals that are well-known and are on the street, the best way the national evidence has shown in helping them is to just get them in a bed as soon as possible. The housing first model is not the only way to do it, because there are people are at different levels. Some folks will not function appropriately if you just take them off the street and put them in an apartment. Okay. Some of them need really intensive 24-hour nursing care. Some of them need 8 or 16-hour case management to be with them at the facility. Some of them need to be in group homes permanently because they have persistent severe mental illness. The reason I think this is a good correlation to crime, and Representative Matayoshi is right to bring it up, to answer that specific question about petty crime, is we have a really small number of really chronic homeless on the island of Oahu and statewide, but especially on the island of Oahu, that are sucking up so much capacity in our ERs, in our jails, in our beat police, our first responders, the firefighters, the paramedics. So much of their time is dedicated to a really, really small number of individuals who have severe, permanent sometimes, or persistent mental illness, and most of which are also co-occurring methamphetamine users. The petty crime that you see is not always associated with them, but they're pulling all of our other resources that could be used to address those issues, to just daily going and visiting folks that are stuck on the street and that we've struggled to be able to either commit mandatorily, or when we do catch them, when it's storming outside and they're sick and they come in for a meal, either to the police or the paramedics or the hospital, to be able to just find a place for them to get better, get whatever type of attention and help that they need. So we've been building out that system, and Representative is right. We've started at the state hospital. And so the folks that are the immediate consumers of this pilot approach statewide are on the windward side. And so we're starting to benefit from that. Representative Marten and I have been we just had a meeting with the police department in Kailua to have a better dialogue about how we can better coordinate that, so they spend less time talking with folks that are sleeping on the street and more time out in community. The last thing I'll say is, part of the reason why it seems like there's more crime, there's a good reason for it, and it's actually a positive thing. It's that, especially in Kailua, the social media attention on Nextdoor and on Instagram and on Facebook, the attention to the reports of crime has exploded. And so we haven't had the data shows that we haven't had an explosion in the amount of crime in our community. We've had an explosion in amount of reporting to the minute, really accurate current data on what's going on in our community with this influx of social media reporting. So people have a better understanding of what's going on in their neighborhood in real time. That doesn't necessarily address the crime issue, but people are better aware of what's going on. And these folks are repeat offenders that work through communities. So once a neighborhood is on alert that there's crime going on, then folks that are not victims are in better position to be on alert. So those are just a few of the things I think that are important to keep in mind, and just in our community in general.
Thank you so much. I think someone else was looking at the thoughts of Representative Branco on this same crime piece, as this is part of his community as well. I think that's what it was. I've been trying to clear that up, and my apologies, Representative Branco. He's looking at your thoughts on this as well.
Yeah, so I live 2 blocks from Taco Bell, and so when I'm going and driving, we as Senator Keohokalole said, we're seeing crime on Facebook, we're seeing crime reports all over, and what I try to do is I work with our police community, but at the same time too, one of my jobs as a legislator, right, is we want our police officers to be fighting crime. And so when I look at bills that are coming through the legislature, someone had a noise pollution bill and wanted the police to keep a log of noise complaints, right? And so that's the other thing when we're legislatively looking at things, is to make sure that, one, we're giving our resources to our police officers, but two, making sure that they have the bandwidth to do everything we want them to do, right? And so that's what I look at. When it comes to homelessness, one of the bills that I propose and I'm working with Lieutenant Governor Green on is our kauhale model, our small house model that has been successful in Waimanalo, but also that we're looking at other areas. And I've seen an increase of homelessness in Kailua. They come down my street now that this wasn't traditionally something. And so when I send out my newsletters, I also ask that one of the ways that you can help is actually to reach out to our police officers, our police department, and let them know, right? That's one of the things that they need to know. And some people say, oh, you're profiling or whatnot, but our police officers, it helps them to have this information. And when I meet with our police officers, this is something they ask us to do. And so I please ask that, you do the same, because when you actually report them, you might not know this, but many of them actually get social services checkups. I'm constantly asking IHS or the governor's office on homelessness, and they go out there and they talk with them, right? And the other thing you have to remember is those individuals who are homeless, well, they have to readily accept the help. We can't force them to take the help. And so that's something also that's important. So even though you see a homeless individual on our streets, please know that they've been reported most of the time, and that we actually have people who are constantly doing wellness checks on them.
Representative. So we want to get a couple questions in before we allow our legislators to have a few minutes to share closing statements. So if you all want to be also thinking about your 2 minutes of closing statements, that would be a good idea as well. But one of the things that came up from our audience, what is being done legislatively to help protect the windward side or mitigate the impact of climate change, particularly sea level rise here on the windward side? Is there anything going on legislatively to help our windward side with that? Senator?
Sure, I'll jump in. There's a lot. Climate change is perhaps the biggest threat that we're not talking about, and it's not in the news day to day like COVID has been or other things. And the windward side is particularly, susceptible. We already experience hurricanes and storms, sea level rise, all the things. Fortunately, Kailua Beach itself is accreting, which means in the short term, at least for the next couple of decades, it'll be pretty stable. But after that, and with the rest of Kailua, which is like, 3 millimeters above sea level for most of the place, we're going to be in big trouble. So looking at what's being done, it's 2 things. One is mitigation. First of all, how do we not contribute to the problem? And, Hawaii's, I think collectively we've worked on making Hawaii the national and in many cases global leader on mitigating our contributions to climate change. 100% clean energy by 2045. Only state right now that is got a legal mandate to be carbon negative by that same time frame, economy wide. So there's a lot going on, and a lot of our fellow states and other countries that we're working with internationally are looking to us and to the goals that we've set. And there's a reason why we were the first. There are now like half a dozen or more other states that are following in our footsteps, because we're all working together, because we're only going to make it if other folks come with us. So that's mitigation. On the adaptation side, we're fortunate we have Kailua resident Chip Fletcher, who's a preeminent coastal geologist and hydrologist and all the ologists there are. And he basically helped lead our state effort looking at the highest resolution sea level rise analysis that we have anywhere in the world at its time, which was a couple of years ago. And that information is now being used to look at how we move roads that are going to be inundated, how we sort of rethink community by community, how we're going to adapt, because not all communities are going to be the same. Waikiki is pretty hardened. That's going to be pretty rough situation to deal with, but how we treat adaptation to sea level rise and other things in Kailua is going to be a totally different model. So we're looking at community by community, what makes sense. And the great benefit to all this is, I mean, I should say silver lining, because it sucks, let's be honest. And it's going to cost us billions of dollars collectively to deal with, is that as we sort of rethink the way that our communities are built out, particularly along the coast, it's a chance to reinvest in those communities. So for example, do we want to put in better infrastructure, upgrade our parks, put in better connectivity for pedestrians and bicyclists, rethink the ways that it has been built, because it's going to have to be fixed and that money is going to have to be spent. So there are mechanisms in place now that are being put in place that would set the stage for those conversations, which are going to be coming in the next few years to come. So it's early yet, but there's a lot going on behind the scenes, and it's all open to the community. It's not like this stuff is hidden. There's a lot of public meetings and other things. Suffice it to say, shoot us an email or give us a call, and we can hook you into any piece of that puzzle, because time is running out for the community to really get involved, and for us to collectively as a state, as a country, as a planet, to deal with this.
Senator. Representative Marten.
I just wanted to say that this is, I have a nonprofit that is focused on climate change, and I've been doing a lot of education in the schools, including doing science curriculum. We have a teacher training going on right now for 2 different grade levels for science units. And we host field trips at Hamakua Marsh where kids can get involved in planting native trees, which is both mitigates and adapts to climate change. But in the EEP, which is the committee that I'm the vice chair of, last year there was a real focus on electrification of our vehicles, which fortunately Senator Lee is the chair of transportation in the Senate, so things go through very smoothly there. And so that's the big push. This year there's a push to basically change our goals with the RPS, which is the amount of our electricity, our power that is renewable, to basically speed up that timeline, because we're finding that HECO is actually exceeding the targets. Renewable energy is getting cheaper and cheaper. It makes so much sense for us as an island to use that local resource instead of importing, expensive oil. So we're moving that way. But the challenging part is electric vehicles, getting the infrastructure in place so that everybody can make that transition. And that's where a lot of the bills and investment is going right now in the House and in the Senate. So that's kind of exciting on the mitigation side. And for adaptation, I have one small bill I'd like to highlight. It's being heard tomorrow in finance, but it's to get more trees in our school campuses. We also have bills to complete the job of getting air conditioning. It's getting too hot to learn certain times of years. I went to public schools in Hawaii. We didn't have AC. We had open windows. Sometimes it was hot, but it wasn't really that big of a deal. Now it is so hot in some places. Maybe Kailua is not the hottest, but in Hilo and places like that, that kids are actually passing out. So in addition to keeping the classrooms cooler, I'd like to keep the campuses cooler with trees and shade so kids can still gather and play outside as it keeps getting hotter. So there's a lot of ways we can mitigate. The coastline is a big deal, right? I represent Lanikai. A lot of Lanikai, to be honest, the area of Lanikai that is losing beach is already almost all hardened with seawalls. There's seawalls buried underneath the sand, old seawalls from before, because the sand has shifted. So I don't know to what extent, how vulnerable Lanikai is because they have already hardened that surface, as opposed to places like the North Shore that have not and are seeing, huge amounts of erosion threatening the homes. And that's all. I just wanted to leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you for that update. So I do want to keep us focused on time. We have about just under 10 minutes left. I wanted to get from the audience, there was one quick update I'd love to get because I think it caught all of our attention. An update on the progress of aerial law. I'm not exactly sure who can help us on that, but a short update on that before we move into closing statements, that would be great.
That is something that I've worked on in collaboration with Senator Lee and with support from our other Windward delegation. And I'd have to say it's not going perfectly, but it's still alive. And the Department of Human Services it reminds me of the Navy in Red Hill a little bit. They don't see a problem. They don't see a need to change anything. And so they have been very resistant. They have opposed pretty much everything, but we have persisted and we are getting them to collaborate. In the end, you need collaboration from a department that you want to carry out a program. And so they are coming around and we are compromising and finding something that might be workable. It turns out that we cannot legally force people who are getting state and federal adoption assistance or guardianship assistance to have home visits. That is what we wanted to do. Ariel was adopted, her sibling as well, some were in foster care, but that family was getting money every month and there was no relationship, no supervision. And so we wanted to change that. And now it seems like it's going to have to be voluntary. We also want to provide more mental health services. So a Department of Health crisis unit that responds to children and youth very quickly. Within an hour of getting a call, they'll be dispatched and go. And right now there are services that will go to a crisis situation, but all they will do is assess the situation and decide whether they need to call an ambulance, send someone to ER or to a psych bed. This is something that would actually provide services. And those services could be for foster parents, for birth parents, for people getting adoption assistance or guardianship, anybody to be able to cope with kids. If kids have been in the foster care system, they are by definition traumatized, right? Either from the abuse they experienced or from being taken away from their families. And they will act out as they grow up and get older in different ways that families may not, their caregivers may not really be able to handle. And so we want to support those families, support the kids. So anyways, I'd have to say that I have shed some tears over that bill. It's not going perfectly, but it's still alive. And I'm really grateful that the health chair in the House, Chair Yamane, is determined to do something despite DHS resistance.
I don't think.
If I can add one thing really quick, there is another measure that Senator Lee and I heard earlier today in the Senate Judiciary Committee, SB 2027, which I introduced on behalf of some of our community advocates, victims' rights advocates who are actually on the town hall tonight. And it's aimed at addressing a hole that exists right now in the law when it comes to sentencing individuals who commit violent crimes and hurt kids. And so there are a couple of things that systemically, it became clear to us were broken systemically around that issue. And One of them is the whole CPS system around children who end up in foster care. But the other is the actual crimes themselves, because every so often, you folks all know this, every so often, some sort of heinous news story pops up in our community about people who do terrible things to children. And so oftentimes the way the system is set up, that, you know, the punishment is not sufficient to fit the extent of the harm that's committed. And part of the reason why this is important, going back to what Lisa said, is, you know, when you look at our chronic homeless in the community, they are also almost to a person victims of some sort of abuse that led to them in that situation. The amount of PTSD in the chronic homeless community is almost always 100%. And when I say a victim, these are not insignificant events that most of the folks on the street who suffer from mental illness or chronic homelessness have experienced. There were almost always really significant cases of abuse, heinous types of cases of abuse that were suffered by them as children. And so this is all connected. And there are a lot of different pieces in the system that need to be addressed that pop up from time to time when these sort of terrible tragedies happen. And this is an opportunity now to make sure that we learn from this situation. It's not going to be perfect, as the representative said, but we are trying to take measures to address it.
Senator. And thank you all for your updates on all these different pieces. So we're going to go, I'm just going to double check. We can go a couple minutes over 8 o'clock if that's okay with everybody. I'd like to give 2 minutes for all of you to be able to make some closing remarks. I'm going to hold you pretty close to the 2 minutes. But if we can do that, we'll go a little bit over. And just for the audience to know that we will be saving the chat, and any questions that weren't addressed, the staff behind the scenes here will be working to get those questions to the appropriate representative here, and we'll make sure that our legislators get back to you with some of those answers. So I'm assumed by none of you just waving your hands and saying no, that you're all okay with us going past 8 o'clock a little bit. And why don't we go in reverse order this time? So Representative Branco, why don't you start us off? We'll give you about 2 minutes here to make some closing remarks.
Perfect. Thank you so much for this opportunity to speak with you folks. COVID has been hard. COVID has been different, and it actually pushed us to find different ways for communication. And I think that's the key, right? Especially for me, always, is to be very transparent, to be very communicative, and always I want to make sure that you folks feel that I'm responding to you. And so one of the best ways for that is through our newsletter. Right now, going through the district, you'll be receiving postcards from our office that has our contact information. And we just ask that if you're interested in signing up for our newsletter, please send me an email. And as always, our email is repbranco@capital.hawaii.gov, and our number is 808-586-6480. Mr. Aki just put it in the chat. But also, just please, I really do encourage you to send me an email or just call me up, and I'm happy to talk about any bill, whether it's a bill I introduced or a bill you're interested that's going through the legislature. Please call me, and we're more than happy to assist. That's why we're here, is to be a resource for you. So mahalo and have a good night.
Thank you, Representative. We'll go with Representative Marten.
Hi, I just want to, I feel like I've spoken so much already tonight, but you folks should know that you do have access to me and to us, right? You can reach out. There are a lot of people that do. They take advantage of it. We can help you navigate state services, make sure you get what you need from the state. And that is part of my job, is to help you do that. So if it's you or somebody you know, if they're not in my district, I will refer them to the right representative. But if they're in my district, it is our job to help them get what they need. I'm also happy to talk about any policy issue. It's too late to introduce new things for this session, but the bills come, and a lot of the work we do has nothing to do with bills. the ideas for things to do, it comes from the community. You folks know what the issues are, you know what's close to you. So if you point out a problem, that's how we start, working on it. I've been working on things that have nothing to do with a bill. As Senator Keohokalole mentioned, we're trying to work with CASEL to slow the flow of new homeless people coming out of psych evaluations. We're working on flood control in Waimanalo with an Army Corps of Engineering federal project. So there's different things going on that have nothing to do with bills, and we're always happy to hear from you. Aloha.
Thank you. Representative Matayoshi.
Yeah, thank you all for being here. One thing that I wanted to bring up that didn't come up in this town hall, but that I've been really trying to champion these last couple of years is diversifying our economy through agriculture. We used to be an economy that relied a lot on agriculture, and it was one of the foundations of our economy. Now we're so reliant on tourism and partially defense, and then we kind of saw how that panned out during the pandemic. So I really think we need to get our agricultural industry back up and running in a smart way, to do it, to focus on plants, animals, aquatic aquaculture as well, that we have a competitive advantage in growing here in Hawaii. So things like specific pathogen-free shrimp, oyster spat, things like that can be grown to size elsewhere where they have the land, but that our cleaner environment can host and that we can produce at high value. So part of it is, of course, supporting our local farmers. Last year, I managed to get a bill passed that sets a goal for a graduating goal for the state to purchase 50% of its local produce by 2050. I'm not just passing that bill and abandoning it. I've been working with Budget and Finance, meeting with the Farm Bureau, meeting with other departments, and so on and so forth, to try to get those long-term agricultural contracts to farmers so that they can put in the infrastructure that they need to start growing real quantities of crops again to be locally competitive. So I'm hoping that this, by the state infusing money into the local agricultural industry, it's going to allow farmers to get those longer term contracts to amortize the cost of the infrastructure over a longer period of time, and to get a more guaranteed revenue stream for them to expand their businesses so that they can not only produce the kinds of crops we need for the state, but also to produce the kind of crops we need for food security for our local population as well. So really working hard on that, and I'm really hoping to again give us another pillar of our economy that we can stand on just in case another disaster hits. Ukraine comes to mind, World War III comes to mind, rather, where we can be a little more resilient, and even if tourism collapses or fades for a time, that we can try to stand up on our own. Thanks.
Thank you, Representative. Senator Lee.
Thanks, everybody. I don't have too much to add other than I really just want to thank our House colleagues for the work they're doing on all the bills that are moving along that are going to come to the Senate, and moving the Senate bills that go to the House coming up here in our legislative session. I want to thank fellow Senator Keohokalole. I actually really want to give a shout out, because folks don't realize behind the scenes how much work he's doing on Red Hill and leading the state's effort there, as well as on homelessness and a bunch of other stuff in the health committee that he chairs. But really, it's just been a pleasure to work with everyone. And as dark as I think the outlook on life can be sometimes, when you have Ukraine and COVID and corruption and all the stuff that goes on, I mean, it's defeating at times. But at the same time, we've had some moments of inspiration. There's a young student, she's 16 years old, comes from Le Jardin, and she wrote a bill that has been moving through the legislature to deal with inequities between pricing of products between men and women, and to see that kind of youthful energy, in spite of all the chaos in the world, come in and just say, no, we're going to do this because our future is where it's at, and that has to be addressed. And not just her, but others like her that have been out in the community volunteering, that I've been working with, and that are out there leading the way, that we often as adults, I think, don't get to see firsthand. It's just so inspiring. So I think just to put into everyone's mind that there is this whole other generation coming up that is actively out there solving the problems that we are all just talking about here year in, year out. It's just inspiring. And I just want to leave on a positive note, because they're the ones that are going to be there when we're gone. And it's so exciting to see them step up to the plate.
Thank you, Senator. And Senator Keohokalole, would you please bring us home here?
Thank you, everyone. I agree with Senator Lee. I think we have a great team here. I think they're all going to be around for a long time. Senator Lee served for 4 years before I did, and he still looks younger than me. So I expect much more out of him for probably 40 more years by the looks of him. Real quick, I'll just do 2 quick updates because he really should have gone last. Lucky we live Hawaii. But the first is that Representative Branco deserves a lot of credit for stepping up immediately to action on the Marine Corps base Hawai'i sewage spill situation. The short of it is safe to swim in the nearshore area. But as you get deeper out into the bay near the outfall, we still have issues. The Marine base is still not in compliance. We can deal with enforcement later. They need to get compliant, and they're working with the Department of Health. We're doing ongoing testing to make sure that the situation is being remedied. That's sort of the short of it. I spoke with the base commander today. You know, we'll deal with punishment later. We got to get the bay cleaned first immediately. And so that's the sort of status. The second thing is Red Hill. I'll just do 1 minute on it, and here's why you need to care. The way the Red Hill facility is set up, there's an access corridor that in the wildest scenario you can dream of ended up being the source of the spill. It's connected by a half-mile long underground shaft to the Red Hill drinking well that services all of Pearl Harbor. The spill, the bulk fuel storage spill happened, the way it happened, it ended up draining out into a hole in the ground 150 yards away from that Red Hill well. The reason this matters is in that 150 yard span, there's a significant amount of cubic square feet of dirt and soil under the fuel facility above the Red Hill well that's just soaked in jet fuel. We don't know how much jet fuel there is. We don't know how large the area of dirt that's soaked in jet fuel is. We just know that it's slowly leaching into the Red Hill well. And once it gets in the well, we know that it's going to reach the aquifer. The Navy right now is pumping 5 million gallons of water a day out of that well. They're running it through these massive granulated activation filters, and then they're releasing the treated water under an EPA permit out into the stream. That's just a short-term mitigation. The water's coming out clean right now, but again, we don't know how long it's going to take for that dirt to leach out all of that fuel. That is the one and only thing that we really should be worried about on the island of Oahu, because the wells in that area represent 20% of our capacity, and it'll take 3 years to dig wells to replace them. That's all we know right now. We don't know enough, and we won't know for a little bit, and we don't know how long it's going to take for us to know whether we'll be able to open up the well, those associated wells, whether the aquifer is permanently damaged and contaminated, or whether we can fix this whole thing. We just don't know right now. And the clock is running because once we get to the summer months, we reach peak periods of use, and we might be in a conservation situation. There are lots of other what ifs that we probably should be concerned about, but we just don't know enough right now. And the Department of Health really is working hard. The governor actually does need to be commended on this. It's the one thing in my tenure in the office that he's been proactive and aggressive on. And unfortunately, we're in a situation where we're fighting the Navy. But that's all we really need to focus on. I mean, I think that's the most important thing to focus on at this point. And I'm happy to follow up. Everyone on the team, I think, is happy to follow up and continue to have this conversation. And we appreciate the opportunity. So thank you very much, and have a great evening.
Thank you so much, Senator, for closing us out with those updates. So I'd just like to thank all of you for the opportunity to come and try to facilitate some of these questions. I really enjoy this. Again, I got to just throw props out for our Windward legislators who always reach out to us to find out what we're thinking and what we want to hear more about. I want to thank the staff behind the scenes for making this flow smoothly. Great job, folks, and trying to feed the questions. Again, if you didn't get your question answered, all the legislator staff are working on this to try and get those questions to the appropriate legislators so they can get back to you and get you an update. But with that, I think we just say aloha and have a great evening. And again, all of you, thanks so much for your time. And thanks to the audience for bearing with us and working with us in this these new Zoom Zoom town halls. So aloha, everybody.
Thank you,
Thanks,
PJ.
everybody.
Aloha.
Aloha, everyone. Thanks, PJ.